We are all the norm. Those are the words of Aston Villa defender Anita Asante. The England international and former Arsenal and Chelsea player is one of the most successful players around, but her journey has coincided with plenty of personal realisations along the way. Right now, she's homing in on the norm, or rather society's perception of what is normal. That ranges from body image to the current situation around the Black Lives Matter movement, and is why she says those perceptions need to change. She's had plenty of personal experience with going against the perceived norm. As she says, she knew herself that she was different from an early age, but it wasn't until her football career took her away from this country that she actually openly came out to her parents. A large part of that was that word again, the norm. So what if we had a society where everyone, regardless of shape, size, strength, colour, sexuality, whatever it might be, was considered the norm? That's what Anita would like to see. That society without a generally prescribed norm about who or what you are supposed to be. This is the Women's Football Diary with Anita Asante. Anita, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for taking the time out to talk to us as well today. How is everything, considering as we record, we're 2 games into the new season, and I suppose we're getting back to some sort of normality in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me on. We're back into the season, 2 games in, 2 results that I think we'll take a lot of learnings from and hopefully will help us push on in a positive way. It's been, I think, a difficult period with the lockdown for all teams, including ourselves, and we're pretty much very much a new group in this team as well, a newly promoted side. But I think there's been a lot of positive application in all the games, despite the results, and it shows that we're a lot closer to those teams than we perhaps from the outside it may seem. But yeah, it's a great environment to be in and a good challenge, I think, for me individually and us as a team.
Definitely, and I know there's a lot of interested eyes, I think, looking at what's happening at Villa. And you're the 3rd player we've spoken to for this series so far who's moved clubs during the summer. But I suppose in terms of not just moving clubs, but like you said, there's so many of you that have arrived at Villa. How's it been, moving first and foremost, but getting everyone integrated when there are quite a lot of new faces at the same time?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that it's a challenge in a different way. You have to try and find those connections and the relationships both on and off the pitch relatively quickly to get that chemistry and dynamic when it comes to the elements of football. But for me, I think I'm in a lucky position in the sense that I've experienced that transition before many times in my career, moving from different clubs, different countries even. So, adjusting to the environment, the coaching strategies and things like that is something that I've learned to sort of cope with and hopefully built the right mechanisms to help me adjust at least. And hopefully I can support my new teammates in that element too.
What are the big things then that you have to take into consideration to, I suppose, get yourself settled when you do move clubs? Because so often I think people take for granted when players do move that it just happens, performances on the pitch, but there's so much off the pitch as well that you kind of need to get right at the same time, particularly when, like you say, you've moved countries as well as just clubs.
Yeah, I think actually that's the key to it, is the transition off the pitch is usually kind of the most challenging for players, because football is what we know and we know to do, and we adjust to the training environment and things like that. But it's all the other stuff outside of it, finding a new place to live, locating the right area and making sure that you can get to training and matches in a timely fashion. If you're foreign, perhaps it's knowing the systems that are in place for your bills and, getting connected basically to the rest of the world and Wi-Fi and all these like other, I guess, supposedly trivial things. But usually that's, for me, I think normally the more stressful part is moving in, transferring all your things to a new place, making sure that everything runs smoothly in that transition, which kind of then allow you to focus more on, meeting a new club, your new teammates, new coaches, and all of that.
When you say bills, for example, that's something that just doesn't cross your mind when you go to like player transfers, does it? But it is something that everyone has to sort out in one way or another. And we touched on this just before we started recording, but with Birmingham currently, as we're speaking, in local lockdown mode right now, I don't gather it's changed all that much, but it must still be a little bit weird that I suppose we're kind of back in this position that a lot of us were facing in March time again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, the rest of the public, it's all been a bit very confusing and not so clear always what the rules and sort of regulations are in place, and especially now city to city or town to town. And for me and the team, luckily, it doesn't affect us too much because we're fortunate enough that we are getting regularly tested as well. We are following all the protocols that the FA are advising in terms of social distancing. I think, myself and especially a lot of the new players, you kind of live in a bubble anyway because you don't know anyone as such in the area. So there's no chance of you necessarily, going to meet people and, spend time in that kind of social setting. So it's pretty much, training home environment. So I'm creating a bubble within my own space that is keeping me safe, and hopefully the public and, my family and people like that safe. But yeah, it is very surreal to know that there is a lockdown here, and, there's going to be restrictions in general for people.
Definitely. In terms of the team, and as I said, we're 2 games in at the moment, 2 defeats, but like you say, you don't just read the results. Particularly, I think the first game, which I watched against Man City, there was a lot of positives to take out of that
Yeah.
Despite what happened. Is that kind of the general mood with everyone right now, and that it's been a positive start regardless of the results?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we look at this as maybe a 9-week period that we've been together, many of us having not played together ever, or even experienced WSL, from many of the players from the Championship and from other countries. So I think the way we've actually managed to gel and adjust as quickly as we have just shows a lot of positive signs, in my opinion. And, sometimes we always look towards success because that's what we strive for, and we're very competitive and motivated people. But it's about the long journey at the end of the day, and failing at times and not succeeding in what we try to do is part of that. I think it's what makes you get better. And then you kind of lay the foundations in terms of our overall standards and objectives. And like you say, I think the first game especially was very positive against arguably one of the top sides in the FAWSL, who are definitely will be challenging, the likes of Chelsea and Arsenal and those types of clubs. I think, we went toe to toe with them for long parts of the game. And football is kind of a game of momentum and moments and opportunities. And they were more clinical in situations where we weren't, for the chances that we created. But honestly, I think the chances we are creating is a good sign. It's showing that we're getting into the right areas. And perhaps it's just that finer detail that we're going to try and hone down in the upcoming weeks.
Definitely, the momentum is such a key thing, as we've seen so many times in games. Yeah. One thing on, obviously you play for a lot of managers in your time, but Gemma Davis, and it's impossible to see her name in any kind of news article without people banging on about her age. It's always mentioned. But ultimately, her as a manager, there's so many good things that are talked about her. Is that something you're seeing firsthand now as to actually what talent there is there as head coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think aside from age, I know a lot of people, like you say, are banging on about, how young she is, which is a great achievement in itself for the position she's in. I think it's more about the person she is and the knowledge she already holds, and her way to sort of apply that to the players that she recruits. And that was definitely one of the main reasons I wanted to come here, is the conversations I had with her and other coaching staff was super positive, very professional. And, I knew instantly they had an ideology about the way they want to play. And for me, that was kind of refreshing to know from the off, there's an identity that they want to instill within the team. And I think we're quite similar in a lot of ways, actually, in our way to, I guess, deliver information maybe and taking on board the feelings of a group, and the messages. And I think, from my perspective, it's really a great environment to be, in at the moment. And, I think she really harnesses the strengths of the group and knows really how to try and get the best out of everyone.
What is the vision? Because I suppose a lot of people automatically would say, avoid relegation is first and foremost priority.
Yeah.
But the idea and the identity to be higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, none of us really play this game to not win. Ultimately, I think any footballer, regardless of whether you've been at top professional sides for a long time or for the first time or whatever, you get on the pitch because you enjoy playing football and you want to win. And I think the same perspective is shared among the players and our coaching staff. How we get there may not be a straight route. At the end of the day, it might take a longer journey and path to get there. But as long as the buy-in is there, which I think it is, amongst the team and the club as a whole, with the long ambition, I definitely think we can propel ourselves into a really good position that we can build from. And of course, like you say, the main objective is to stay in the league. But I think we know that we have a lot more to offer as a group, and in our own heads, we'll be striving for more. And we, every game, whether we win or lose or draw, we're always striving to be better than we were in the last game. I think that's the most important thing, and hopefully that application is what will get us kind of the results that we're hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you see, like I say, the record of past promoted teams, they've always given a good show of themselves, particularly Tottenham and Manchester United last year, obviously, with what they managed to do. In terms of the WSL, is this the toughest it's ever been?
Yeah, I had this conversation recently, and I said, it's interesting because obviously as a newly promoted side, that's a challenge in itself. Adjusting to a new league. Many of our players are going full time for the very first time in their career. There maybe isn't the same experience and depth compared to some other teams, but we've got that condition along with a whole host of other conditions, one of which being the strengthening of a lot of the top sides in terms of the capital and money they're putting in, and investment they're putting into world-class signings, as we're seeing across the WSL, which is obviously very exciting. I think it's going to push the competitiveness again another level, which means that everyone has to step up again a gear. And the 5 substitution rule as well, things like that is an adjustment. It's something that maybe isn't talked about as much or looked at, but that also has implications for all teams in different ways.
Something that's just popped into my head based on what you said about professional contracts there, and a lot of the players having professional contracts for the first time ever. Is that easy to adjust to when you become professional for the first time? Or does it ultimately depend on the player and who the player is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good question. And I don't think I could generalize an answer on that question, because I think at the same time, my personal view would be, when I got my first professional contract, I didn't know what it necessarily meant to be a full-time pro. No one sort of gives you a guideline as to how's it to be an ultimate professional, because it's not just what you do on the pitch, it's how you utilize the time off the pitch, how you recover, the small percentages and advantages you can get from the way you are in your preparation and the way you review games or whatever it is. And that was part of learning on the job to some degree, and sharing that experience with other players in a similar position, because they were also pro for the first time. And And now having the blend of players that have been pro and players that haven't, hopefully we can sort of lead by example as well, and support our teammates in that, you know, for the questions they might have or the support they might need in terms of, you know, applying themselves to be the best professionals they can be, because we're all different as well in how we like to utilize our time on and off the pitch. So I think it's an adjustment definitely for those players. I'm sort of talking from the more mental side of it, I guess, but it could also be physical. It's a physical adjustment if you've not been used to, you know, putting your body under duress in a full-time capacity.
You're listening to the Women's Football Diary. Join the conversation on social media using hashtag Women's Football Diary.
I suppose in terms of the mental side of things and the physical side of things as well, this is where I bring it on to the body image conversation that we've had with every guest we've had on this podcast so far, specifically the issues of body image in football, which was, I don't know if you saw the BBC Elite Sportswomen survey that had that key statistics in it that kind of sparked the conversation, in that 78% of those surveyed said that they were subconscious of their body. Is that something you see as an issue in football first and foremost? And a lot of the time, does that pressure maybe, is that kind of at play when it comes to training and perhaps the perception that society has about female athletes not looking too muscly because then you look too manly and so on, as ridiculous a view as it is? But I think we all know that it's lingering around still.
Yeah, I think it's a really complex discussion and issue in general. Because I think in terms of football, I think there's so many barriers already, especially being a female athlete in the sport to begin with, that most of the women and girls that participate kind of probably get over that a little bit because they just want to play, you know, and they'll do whatever it takes to get themselves in the right physical, I guess, shape or to compete ultimately. But I do agree that the body image and the body image issue is not necessarily pertaining to the sport itself. It's not that management or coaches and stuff are going, you know, oh, you're too muscly or you're this or you're that. I think that there may be incidences like that, but for the most part, coaches and technical staff, physical staff are there to try to support us to be the best athlete we can be. And they'll put in certain constraints that aren't obvious to everyone, that aren't saying that you are, or that we're trying to control, you know, how we eat or how we do our strength training as such. But what I mean by that is by supplying, say, meals at the club, we all know that we're getting a very good nutritious diet, for example, that will help us to perform. And that's a control measure in a way, but it's also educative because it allows those of us who maybe haven't been in or experienced good nutritional advice in our careers to go, oh, okay, this is what I should be eating. This is how I should be training. Or, you know, because it's not just about training enough, it's also about not overtraining and things like that, you know, as well. So it works on both sides of the coin. But when it comes to negative, I think, stereotypes of female athletes being muscular or I think that does play a part into, especially younger women, perhaps subconsciousness when they get into sport and they think, oh, I don't want to look too, you know, too strong or, you know, that type of thing. And I think that's negative because we limit the idea of what we think women are as well and what women should look like. And we should be celebrating women along all different parts of the spectrum. And I remember very clearly seeing a time when Serena Williams, you know, was negatively written about in the press, you know, about her physique and her stature, you know, which I think she's always been proud of and celebrated. So it sends the wrong messages out, you know, and I think it's important that it's the media around the game as well, and the people tuning in are positive with their messages when it comes to the body image issue.
Yeah, the messages I think are so important, because how many times have we seen, particularly recent examples, whether it's the Irish rugby kit launch that was, I think, 3-4 weeks ago now as we record, where they use models instead of the players.
Yeah.
As a prime example.
Sends the wrong signal, doesn't it?
Exactly. And I know Leah Lyons, who's one of the Irish rugby players, was on this podcast about a year ago and had to contend with all that sort of shaming comments and things on social media. But ultimately, her body works for the sport she's in.
Yeah.
Is that, I suppose, is the main issue or the main worry, that those perceptions stop potential talent, younger girls, getting into those sports in the first place, because they're worried what their body might look like, sort of thing, if they do train, when they could go down this different angle and look like what society and maybe the Instagram era wants to look like.
Well, this is a big issue in general, because I think, I've had people on social media refer to me as a man and things like that, and I feel like I have quite thick skin. I just deal with it, but at the same time, I'm like, it's not really okay that people feel the need to refer to people negatively because of their stature or whatever, And when it comes to body image, it's about visibility. The more we show women in different sports, different industry, who look different to me and you and anyone else, then we recognize that we're all the norm. There isn't a prescribed norm, and that's the problem. We have this kind of general prescribed norm in society, whether it be in sport or out of it, that allows for people to feel that they can box us by our gender and our physique and our, image, or, whatever it is. And that's the biggest problem. And when you start to show images and talk about these subjects on a more kind of regular, open basis, then it doesn't even become a discussion. It becomes the acknowledgement that these are women, they're athletic, they need to have muscles and strength so that they can compete, so that they can be explosive, that they can be strong. Otherwise, we'd be negatively reacting to the fact that they can't do any of those things because their body doesn't allow them to.
We are all the norm. I like that phrase, by the way. It's just like says perfectly what we should be saying.
Yeah.
But it's taking some time to get to that stage. Before I get to that question, I'll move on to Black Lives Matter at the moment, because I think there's a lot of, for me, in the position I'm at, or I'm in as a journalist, seeing what I see, there's a lot of similar themes between that and I suppose issues with body image and LGBT issues as well. I suppose the lack of acceptance from some corners of society, let's put it that way. And I know Black Lives Matter is something you've been vocal on as well. Is that something that still needs a lot of work and education in society? I always point back to the comments I had to delete from the newspaper I work for, from their Facebook page at the height of the protests, and it was getting so bad that we essentially had to stop posting stories on Facebook because they kept getting hijacked by people. Right. And that it was the perfect summary for me of just how under the radar but massive the issue is at the moment.
Yeah, where to begin with all of this. I think it's been something that has probably affected a lot of people, whether you're from the Black community or not, in a massive way, and has really challenged our belief systems, our thought processes, the things we thought we knew that perhaps aren't actually true. And for the first time, we're really delving into details and trying to listen a little bit and understand, and also I think educate ourselves about what, number one, this movement is about, because I think that message is also being hijacked at times and trying to dilute it somewhat and polarize groups. When the message is very clear, it's about, human rights, making sure that we want to treat all people equal. It's also about stopping police brutality and the abuse of power, basically, and equal opportunities, ultimately. That's what I understand it to be. And I think from the core of this movement, that's what it's about. I think it is going to take more time. It is more about education, but it's also about holding parts of our society and institutions to account as well, and not letting it just sort of fly under the radar as an accepted part of the way things are as well. Because, I just read recently John Boyega, the actor, talk about an advertising campaign he was on, and it was about his personal story that they used to promote a perfume brand. And in a different part of the world, they completely erased him from that. Yeah, it's his story. So I think from my perspective, this is what many Black and non-white people are saying, is that we don't want to have our stories erased anymore. Do you know what I mean? We don't want to have our history erased. We don't want to have our culture erased. We don't want a rewriting of certain elements of the truth. We want it so that we all understand it, we all know, and that's the only way we really can move forward positively, and and I just think we've got to a point where we've hit this monumental moment, and this window of opportunity is really opened for us to collectively see each other, really recognize that actually I'm no different to my LGBT allies, and other groups that also are marginalized and treated poorly as well. And understanding, I think it's just for society to understand, that no one is pointing fingers necessarily at any specific person, but they're saying, what can you do to make your environment more positive and more fair in every given situation, ultimately? Because there are elements of us that will live in this society with certain privileges, some of which we weren't aware of, and some that we might be aware of. But when a group is telling you, this is hurting me, or this is upsetting me, how do we respond? And how do we want to be remembered ultimately?
Is there almost, again, this is not a blanket comment of society, but I suppose certain sections of it, almost an inability to listen to others about viewpoints that do not conform to your own? That makes sense.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's this uncomfortableness that no one really wants to confront. It's not a nice subject. Police brutality is not a nice subject. Watching men and women be killed for no reason, or, because it is no reason. People commit crimes all the time, no matter what color you are, do you know what I mean, or not. They don't even have to commit a crime to still be murdered, essentially. But it's understanding that it's not about sort of an us and a them situation, but understanding that one group is affected disproportionately in these situations compared to another group. Do you know what I mean? And how do we, as a group of people, human beings, go, well, actually, we don't want any systems abusing their powers like that. Because it may be this group today, it could be a different group tomorrow, And so I think there are some people who are just tone deaf within society, who don't want to upset their own rhythm in their lives and what's going on for them, or what they deem as comfortable, and maybe don't want to be challenged in that, to just change and grow as a people. And then there are some people that genuinely, I think, don't understand, but don't know how to ask the questions or have the discussions because they don't want to offend as well. And I definitely understand that there are people who want to be better informed and are afraid to. And then there's a whole group of people that think that, in one sense, they acknowledge that this is about power, and the unequal distribution of that. But in the other sense, they almost feel that one group that has been marginalized that's saying, look, we've been living in this situation for decades. We don't want to tolerate it anymore. Somehow want to usurp that power, not acknowledging that the fact that you have this power is wrong in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have a hard time to understand it's not about any given group of people, individuals having this power. It should be a shared power across society that allows us to, have transparency in the systems that govern our day-to-day lives, and us be able to take them to account, and also know that justice will actually be served when it is initiated.
I asked Alice Deering this, the open water swimmer, who's also quite vocal on this, and she said it felt like a turning point these last few months. Does it feel the same to you?
Yeah, I definitely feel that the awareness has been greater than it's ever been, because I think it's crossed all industries. It's been so visible. The discussions are happening. The regular daytime shows that normally would, want to talk about, I don't know, someone and their dog's pantomime costumes.
We still sometimes report that.
Which, is also good. You need to have the balance. I think they are also taking up the discussions because they're also recognizing the importance of this, and that maybe we are at a time where people are more willing to have these discussions and are open to it, where previously we haven't been. But maybe that's also because the diversification of those spaces and platforms have opened up a bit more too, which allows us to have, these programs and things that are going to really take on board these issues. So I do think it's a turning point, but it's about what next. And it's about how do we use this moment to really create positive change that will impact us collectively for the future generations to come, so that they benefit from a society that is more equal in lots of ways. So yeah, I do think that is the case. But, early on in the campaigns, when major marketing groups in, fashion industry, whatever, every industry was showing in their way, their version of solidarity through social media and whatnot, that's probably the easiest thing we could all do. What people want to see is that real tangible action and change. What are they doing behind the scenes to ensure that they are creating fairer opportunities and diversifying their sector, and diversifying narratives, as we see in the media as well. How do you diversify the newsroom so that not all the stories are maybe aligned to, one type of storyline?
Which is exactly the types of conversations I'm involved with on a daily basis in our newsroom, about how we can broaden the content basically and serve far more audiences than we have been for quite some time. On that note, and this may be quite a big or maybe unfair question, but specifically in relation to the Premier League and the No Room for Racism campaign, which I'll be honest, did not, or the issue wasn't automatically flagged to me. I didn't spot it until I read Hugh Wozencroft's of TalkSport, his piece in the Times the other day, as to why that campaign ultimately had a completely different message to the one that he felt we should be sending out. For those not in the know, the Premier League have replaced the Black Lives Matter logo with the No Room for Racism logo. I suppose, is that something that you may be disappointed in seeing on that side of things, or if that message has kind of been lost in translation a little bit?
Yeah, I think what would be interesting to know is why they took that decision and why they felt it was necessary, because I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the intent or motivation is behind that. But all I can say is, again, I think it kind of dilutes the original movement and message in a way, because, that message is strong and it's powerful, and, and it was there and instigated for a reason. and it doesn't allow it to become this generic broader message when we're saying categorically a specific group of people are disproportionately affected in every part of society for decades. What are we going to do to address it and really talk about it and try and move these discussions forward? So for me, that's what I question. That's what I wonder, because no room for racism. Well, there should, of course, that goes without saying. I think, there shouldn't be any form of racism or sexism or, whatever. So, whereas this previous message was more, it was very specific. It was very prescribed in what it's trying to get people to think about consciously. We're trying to get people to think about how Black people, and other ethnic minorities are treated in our walks of life. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like we say that this is a window of opportunity and a turning point. Well, the turning point it's not a campaign. It's not a project. It doesn't last for 2 weeks, because today I'm Black and tomorrow I'm Black. And for the rest of my life, I'm going to be Black, just like everybody else. And their lives continue and the challenges they face will continue. So really, I think that was the point of this movement. And that's why it touched everybody in this very palpative way globally. So yeah, for me, it kind of dilutes the message that really people who are behind this want. And again, it might speak to the fact that maybe the people in the Premier League deciding on these things are not part of the affected groups. You're not part of the affected groups, then, maybe it's an easier decision for them to make, changing it, where you need to have people's lived experience part of that decision, perhaps, or at least consulting on what they think is an appropriate measure.
Consulting, for me anyway, is one of the big things, because I always say I've learned arguably some of the most important lessons in my life from people I've talked to in my job, who have obviously come from so many different backgrounds, and you see things in a totally different way. For example, this viewpoint, once I read that article from Hugh Wozencroft, then suddenly it opens your eyes, which I do wonder, like you say, who knows if they did, but if it had been consulted, then maybe they would have realised what that message change would have meant to a lot of people. Or kind of moving on to the LGBT issues, and I know it's, again, something you've done a lot of campaigning, speaking out for, particularly in July time as well. How did you manage growing up with that, I suppose, that conflict of identity? I know it's something we spoke with Ella Massar about as well, because she had a similar kind of conflict when she was kind of getting to grips with who she actually was. And when I read the piece that you did with Sky in July, and to read that by the time you left England in your playing career and you still weren't openly out to your parents, how is that, with that almost conflict in your head? I don't know if it was on a daily basis, but just kind of getting to grips with who you actually are as a person.
Yeah, no, I think like we always talk about, everyone's journey is different, and it takes some of us much quicker to realize or address these internal issues related to ourselves, and some of us a lot longer. And I think for me, growing up, I always knew I was a bit different to other kids or whatever in my school or team or that type of thing. But at the same time, there's a kind of subconscious part of you that knows what expectations are and what society expects from you, and what society and family and people close to you have shaped as a norm, the family environment, or what kind of life you're supposed to have beyond your teenage years when you're 30.
It's the norm thing, that exactly what you said before at the start, as in society's norm and what it expects of you.
It always comes back to those norms about gender and sexuality and family units and things like that. And I think, like most people, I was very aware of that early on in my childhood, and that made it more challenging for me to confront it, and discuss it with my family and even close friends. I had many friends that I had never actually ever said, by the way, I'm gay or anything like that until much, much later in my life. But that's always a challenge, especially for me. I felt when I was younger, being a Black young girl also playing football puts you in that kind of, you are different anyway. And you add my culture to that, being African, Ghanaian woman, like there's still very much that very conservative idea of family, and what kind of occupation you should have, what kind of life you should build for the future. So all of those things, I think, somehow inhibited me in a way, in terms of my personal growth in confidence and esteem, to just be my authentic self. And it's all related to lots of things. Of course, most of us would have liked a role model, maybe, or someone from your community or background that maybe could understand it, and you can discuss your feelings and experiences with. And if I look back, then I guess I could say, I wish I had someone like that I felt confident or felt safe enough to share what I was going through. But that is, I think, but now when I get to talk about it more and I'm more confident to talk about myself, I hope that has a positive impact on other young girls or boys from my background as well, especially, to feel that they can come out, they can be their authentic self, they can pursue their ambitions, whether it be in sport or otherwise, in the future.
Was there not so much a turning point, but something that just meant you wanted to share the news openly? Whether it was like, I don't know, we call it a trigger or what, but just where you reached that point where you didn't want to keep it to yourself anymore.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think it's an internal pressure, and it's like a pressure cooker a little bit. It's like a clock that's ticking all the time. And if you're like me and how I felt like I was always hiding a part of myself from people close to me, and that didn't allow me to be fully myself always in those environments and in those social settings. And there's only so long you can kind of live your life that way before it becomes stressful, and before you feel like you're carrying this sort of weight on you in your life. And I think when that happened, my mom, actually, we had a conversation. She asked me, and I told her outright yes. And then we went on to have conversations later on. But it took a long time for me to get to that point. And really, I would say my mom sort of instigated that anyway. So, thank you, Mum. But at the same time, I did actually, during this period of time, go and see a psychologist when I was living abroad, to discuss these issues, because I felt that it was a lot of weight and pressure building up. I felt the weight of it, and I felt that I don't know how long I can cope with this feeling before I kind of lose it, or mentally don't feel great or whatever. So that for me was a turning point as well, to try to address some of these issues early on. Basically to find that sort of inner peace that it's gone, it's out there now. What will be. I've said it. It's for everybody else to react, and then I will work off whatever kind of behaviours I encounter.
I can't imagine what it must be like to just lift that weight off all of a sudden, sort of all those years of keeping it internal.
Yeah.
And then, like I say, your mum asking you, it kind of takes it out of your hands a little bit, but it must be just such a release when it does come out there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's relief, you never know how something major like that in your life is going to affect you or the people around you, and you never know how people are going to respond. But I think my initial feeling was relief, like it's out there now, like what will be, you know. And luckily, you know, my family have been really supportive and we're really close, but I know that's not always the case for everyone. But the kind of strength and empowerment it gives you once you do it for yourself and not for others is really good.
In terms of that strength, is there a large part of you that wants to be the role model to others that you wish you had at the time?
Yeah, I don't know if I think of myself consciously working hard to be a role model for others, but I do think that I recognize the struggles I've had in different scenarios in my life. I also am interested on a personal level in things to do with society and, you know, social interaction and politics and things like that. And so now I feel like I have the opportunity to help people in various ways. And sometimes there is that connection through sport that I can do it through. And, you know, I don't look at myself as this like perfect person, but I think that I'm willing to stand for others outside of myself. And I think that's important because I would want people to do the same for me if I faced any kind of, like significant situations that would affect my life. And I think lending my platform as well, where I can, to very important issues that normally don't get the same kind of traction because it's not as popular or, you know, light-hearted or something like that, I think is really important too, because there's lots of people going through lots of different things in life, and they just need to know there's someone there listening, I think, sometimes, and someone there who's willing to lend their support or lend their platform to give them, you know, a few minutes of our time for that cause.
Which is even more important when you consider the times we're going through right now and what people might be facing.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of the norm, which we've touched on a few times, is the norm almost that athletes do not have a political opinion or opinions in general? Because so many times I've seen it where you know, an athlete can voice their opinion on whatever subject it is, and then it's always stick to sport, which I've always found baffling. But I don't know if you get that sense that there is, again, that idea still lingering around.
Yeah, I think actually it's shifting. I would say that it's shifted more than ever. Do you know what I mean? I think in the past there have been athletes that have stood up in pinnacle moments in history where very obvious levels of, say, in American segregation, or, you know, the World War II and the Olympics and, you know, Nazi occupation, things like that, where there's been these monumental moments where someone has stood up for human rights. Okay, but now we live in this social media age where there's even more connectedness. There's even more, you know, athletes have a whole host of people globally that will support them, you know, follow their ambitions, will, you know, join in the causes that they also support and things like that. And athletes are recognizing that. They're recognizing the pool and the platform they have. And I think more athletes are willing now to use it in various ways than ever before, and not feeling like they don't have the space to do that, because the game itself and sport itself doesn't always allow and provide that platform in the moment for athletes to share and use their voice or their, you know, their image or whatever to support you know, an issue, a political, socio-political issue, or anything, a cause, you know, a heart foundation, whatever it is. But from their own social media platforms, they can absolutely do that to some degree without as much restraint or constraints, if you like. And I think you're seeing like likes of Naomi Osaka, you're seeing, you know, Rashford, Sterling, the Premier League players coming together for the NHS, all of these are positive actions done by athletes, willing to step outside this idea of I'm just a footballer, I'm just an athlete, I'm just a sports person, no one cares about what I think. No, people care about what they think. People want to know that they're just like everyone else, that they are also affected by COVID, in different ways. They have families they care about, friends they care about, people they work with they care about, who support their careers. So actually, I think more than ever, and I'm kind of like, finally, thank God, like we've got people and other athletes that are willing to not just, willing to step outside of themselves and share their platform and speak out, and also do it not just individually, at times collectively, so that there doesn't have to be that lone ranger that has to, take the brunt of everyone's sort of convictions and things like that.
The shift, I think, is a really big thing that you touched on, in that how recently do we have to go back to look at Colin Kaepernick, for example, and what he did as the Lone Ranger, like you describe it, and now here we are, and for example, the entire basketball games were stopped for one night.
Yeah,
for the prime example.
US national women's football team, Megan Rapinoe, those athletes going against, at the time, the federation and things like that, to just stand for a cause, that they felt was important, massively, is a massive shift, I think.
Absolutely. Finally, touching on social media, love it or hate it, or both, or neither?
Yeah, I think both. I love it and I hate it. Like, sometimes I love it because, there are days when I just want to like look at something funny, or
You wanted a cat video or something.
Yeah, look at cute little dogs and stuff that someone's done an account of, or like very funny, interesting kids doing something creative and something, or sports or whatever. And, for my own stuff, putting it out there, trying to get an audience that will engage for the things that I am interested in or support, then I think it's great. The flip side is the lack of filtering, the lack of, everyone can go on there, anyone can say and do whatever they want to anybody without any kind of consequence. I think is the sort of hated part of it. I think, I'm quite active on things like Twitter as well, because I think I get to get into more like dialogue and discussion, debate, or sharing debate sometimes on something fun as well, but at the same time, you realize once you use a platform like that often enough that it is just another kind of echo chamber, and to some degree I think there's innate human thing where you want to connect with people like you who share your values and views, which is, it's good, but at the same time it's kind of, it can be problematic too, because you actually need to engage with people with opposing views and opposing whatever opinions, so that we can be like, oh, you know what, I never thought of something like this, or you have discussions and you come to the completely different solutions, and you realize that I didn't understand why you felt this way, but now I do. And actually, it's not a case of I can never interact with a person like this or like that we're all many parts of one being. There's lots of things that characterize us, and sometimes we just need to be in the right space to interact with people that can challenge us in different ways as well, and also support our views. So yeah, that's the only part of it that I think sometimes is a little bit out of hand, is that anybody can like contact you and harass you, if you like, or I don't know, bully you essentially online. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I've had some interesting direct messages sent to me in my time, so I can totally sympathise.
Make sure you follow Sportspiel on social media. Search for @SportspielPod on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram.
moving on then to my final part, and I think we should actually talk a little bit about football after that. Like so many important points raised, but I know some people will actually want to hear about the kind of a big question. But in terms of your career journey, from when you started at Arsenal to where you are now at Villa, what's the biggest difference in you as a player and as a person?
Ooh, as a player, it's a tough one. I haven't really thought about it, I don't think. Yeah, I think like, okay, when I was at Arsenal, you know, when I joined the club, I was 14 years old, and I felt like I spent the bulk of my early years and my youth up into my early 20s developing at the club and having like so much respect for the manager at the time, Vic Akers, and my teammates, you know, and I felt like I just, at that time, it's like the world is your oyster kind of thing, you know, you're on this amazing journey and you're excited to be there, and you want to stay there, you know, you want to keep going, you want to keep playing, you want to win things. And at that time I felt like I was in the best environment to be pushed and develop, because I had good leaders around me too. So, you know, I had really strong women around me as well that I think helped me both on and off the pitch, because I was a bit shy and I was a bit introverted, and, you know, at times could be possibly a bit timid. So I think to have these strong characters that kind of knock that out of you, and like you've got to show up, you've got to be present, because they're not going to just allow you to just hide in the corner type of thing. So yeah, I think playing with the likes of Jane Ludlow and Kelly Smith and, you know, Faye White, all of these players, Ellen Maggs, really helped me to not only express myself on the pitch, express myself off the pitch as well, and find that confidence. And I would say, I guess the difference between then and now is like, now you probably can't get me to shut up if you get me on the right topic and subject. So now I definitely have that voice and that confidence to talk about things, a lot of different things. You know, my body has definitely changed a lot because I definitely break down a lot more, or have done in the past 2-3 years than previously. So, you know, that's just part of the football journey, I guess, from, you know, youth to being a senior player, a veteran player. And I think now, where I was looking up to leaders and players older than me that had, you know, been there, done it, seen it, you know, got the trophies, if you like, I'm now in that position to try and be a leader for my team, and to pull others along with me, and to show them that I believe in them, and, you know, that hopefully the group respect me enough to trust what I'm saying and giving to them as advice and support on and off the pitch. So I think that was the major difference. I went from the quiet one, the introvert, to the one who is a leader, to, you know, trying to be a leader to a group now.
And perhaps helping any of the other introverts coming through the system
exactly.
to express themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think has been the biggest thing you've learned along the way? There's another big one to throw at you.
Ooh, biggest thing I've learned along the way, I guess, for me, you know, I guess just to enjoy like every single moment that I'm with a ball and on the pitch and get to play. Because when you're an elite player at this level, you know, both through your club or your country, there are many times where, because we want to win and we're competitive and we're ambitious, you put loads of pressures on yourself as well, you know, individually as a team, to meet these expectations. Some of them realistic, some of them unrealistic. But no one else knows that, because they just see the shirt you have on, the country you represent. It's like, you should be here, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But no one knows like all the sacrifices that go into you being in that position, or where the game was and where it's come, you know, as far as it's come now. So I think for me, it's just to take that kind of feeling of fear or failure out of it and enjoy every moment that is on the pitch and on the ball, and recognize that, that like it's better to try and give everything all the time than to worry about not meeting these expectations along the way, because then anyway you'll just regret that anyway, so I think that's what I've learned the most, is that every football game is just a game.
Was that's a similar theme actually that quite a few people have mentioned, i.e. the sort of the be in the moment kind of message. Was that something you had to kind of pick up early doors to try and get rid of that initial worry about what may or may not happen in a particular game, and to teach yourself that it is just a game ultimately?
Yeah, I think game experience and exposure is what helps you develop that. Actually, it's being in those situations where you win, lose, or fail, or draw, I should say. But when you do actually fail and you don't meet your personal expectation or the team expectation, it allows you to try and find elements of resilience and understand yourself better. Like, what would I do differently next time? And was I in the moment, or was I too concerned about what others are thinking, or others watching me are thinking about my performance, as opposed to just do what I know to do in that moment. It will come off sometimes, it might not in other times, but that's part of being a footballer. Those that dare, I think, more often are the ones that succeed and create opportunities to win as well. So it's better to be in that position than those that go out there and worry about all the things that haven't happened yet, because all of those things are just an illusion until it actually happens. So that part of it is how you control your mind, I guess, to that degree.
And I think a lot of parallels between life, I suppose, with a lot of people and kind of being in the moment again. That Arsenal team as well, again, even now when you look at what the likes of Chelsea, Man City and Arsenal are doing, and you look at the trophies that team won that you were part of, Champions League, successive league titles, etc. The list goes on, and it does go on. What was it about that team that just made it so right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like, when I think back to that team, obviously I have such amazing memories from that time, and I always felt like throughout my career since that time, I was like, there's never going to be a place where I can ever replicate that feeling in that team, and for me, I think that's really true. I think the chemistry that we had in that team, and the belief and trust, most importantly, I think we had in each other, is probably what allowed us to be as successful as we were, because we weren't a team of just always tapping each other on the shoulder, good job, when we knew it wasn't. Do you know what I mean? If I made a lot of mistakes or whatever, or any individual didn't fulfill what we knew they could, the potential they had, there were people that would get on your ass, would tell you, would get, be firm about it. And I think that's what helped us be a good team, a better team every time, every season when we, stepped on the pitch, because we wanted to beat that, that previous record, or we wanted to win these crucial matches in Champions League. And that's important, to have people around you that can do both, and you trust them, and that's why they can do it. That's why she can tell me off. I trust her, I trust Jane or whoever it was that was, as a senior player, telling me I know you've got this, I believe in you, just give it everything, because that's what you feel. Your team is your family. You spend so much time with your teammates, and to know that everyone has each other's back is the kind of chemistry you need on the pitch, because it's that I will fight for you, you fight for me mentality, I guess. And I also think the time I was joined at Arsenal was a perfect time in the history of the club as well, because the men's team was highly successful at the time. our manager worked as the kit man for the men's team. He was closely aligned to them. He watched a lot of what they did. And I think, he tried to impart some of that knowledge into the way we trained, into our, playing strategy. And it allowed us to create a nice brand of football, I think, as well. And it was something that we all enjoyed. And a lot of the girls that I knew that played at the club at the time, we all kind of came from urban areas as well, where a lot of us grew up playing street football and things like that. So I think having the combination of that kind of street, raw, whatever, creative elements of the game, and then bringing it into this kind of more organized, structured setting was the perfect blend of people and style of play as well.
And you mentioned, obviously, Kelly Smith, big name. We all know what she's done with her career. And Jane Ludlow, for example, is another one who's come up a couple of times on this series.
Yeah.
This is the question that always gets people thinking. Who's the most underrated player in that team?
Ooh, underrated. I would say, and it's maybe I'm biased because I was, flitted between midfield and centre back, but probably Kira Grant. Kira Grant, was the centre back, could play centre mid. But to be honest, I could name a few. If I'm, truly honest, I could name a few. Kirsty Peeling, we all used to say had a ping on her. Like, we were like, no one has the technique that Kirsty has on the ball when she would play a diag or anything like that. So, there's a few players I could name, but I would say Kira, because her timing was always like exceptional, like her positioning, her way to read the game, and the way she is, her personality just made you feel calm. At least for me, coming into that team, knowing that I got big boots to fill because this is a winning side as a youngster, to have someone like that who is so calm and collected and just leads by the way she plays, her game intelligence, I would say is probably Kira Grant.
Like I said, those are, I think, qualities that often go under the radar. Usually the ability to read a game and things like that. Kind of looking at that, or the Chelsea squad right now, so the team you've just left.
Yeah.
And there's obviously so much talk about them going for the Champions League now. And to be honest, with the ridiculous squad they've got right now, you expect that, to be honest, with that as the aim. But do you see a lot of similarities between that Arsenal team and this Chelsea team now?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this Chelsea team has more ammunition than our Arsenal team.
Firepower is frightening.
Because obviously they've really strengthened in depth for every position, and probably know-how as well, because they've recruited players that have really good experience at that level in those competitions, in the likes of Harder and Leupolz and players like that. So I think they're in a great position, obviously, to compete this year in Europe. And basically, all the things are aligned for them to do it. It's really about them taking the opportunity and doing it and making it happen and believing in the talent in their squad and then sticking together as a squad as well. Because, obviously not everyone can play with the kind of quality they have in a team. That's a challenge in itself. But I'm sure that the training environment is highly competitive and, the intensity levels will be there. That will put them in a great position to compete in Europe.
Last thing on Chelsea, and I know we spoke about what Gemma Davis brings right at the start to the Aston Villa team. The influence of Emma Hayes on that team. Can you understate how big that is, regardless of the amount of star quality there is in that squad and has been for some time?
Yeah, no, I think, Emma has so much knowledge and experience in this women's game. She's seen where it's gone to where it is right now. She's experienced it both at home and abroad. And I feel like she's sort of tried to take the best parts of all of her experiences and the players she's worked with to impart that in the brand that is Chelsea today, and what has been a long project up until this point, where you're seeing that progress has really translated on the pitch and with trophies season upon season. And that is largely to do with Emma. That's largely to do with how, it's not just the coaching element. It's not just what she's doing on the pitch. I think it's more to do with actually how is she setting up the club for progress. What is she challenging in and around the environment to make it better for players, make it challenging, keep them motivated, and all of that. A lot of the time we focus on big clubs and big players, and it's about transfers and money and all these types of things, contracts. But most players just want to know that they can be in a really good full-time environment with the right staff around them to support their development. Having basic things, physios, a team doctor, a technical coaching staff, whatever, good pitches to train on, a locker room that's theirs. I'm talking about, these are the things that I think MRE pays attention to and details to, and that is what is driving the standards at the club and beyond, because then that's how you get big players. That's how you get better players there, because they know I'm going to be in the best training environment I possibly can be in to develop. And in turn, you've seen that, and that's, season upon season, the team has got stronger and more developed and more ruthless because of the standards in training and her driving that intensity, and by having that level of quality in your squad allows you to maintain those standards in your group. And I think hopefully, especially in Europe, that's something that people will be able to really see.
Absolutely. And like you say, that drive, particularly with the Arsenal team that you were talking about before, it's almost like she's that one person drive for Chelsea a lot of the time. And she almost sets the tone ultimately for that entire club, certainly from the outside looking in anyway.
Yeah, I mean, she ultimately she's the manager, and as a player, aside from everyone else, you want your teammates to respect you, you want your teammates to believe in you, but you want your manager to see you and believe in you the most. So she has the ability to, I guess, garner that respect from her players too, that they want to give everything in a training session to maintain those levels, and then continue that for when it comes to competitive matches. And that comes from her. That comes from her presence and her ability to get a good group of, I guess, of.
Finally, can't really not talk about England either, considering your career with the national team, and also GB at the Olympics, because I think we still look back on that as just a rare time, and we were all looking forward to it happening again in 2020, and obviously that's been delayed.
Yeah.
How did you, I suppose, ultimately see the England setup change in your time? Because I suppose when you look at it now, obviously it's worlds away from what it was a relatively short time ago, but just how quickly did that change come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I was in the England squad for a long time under Hope, and I think in those days, a lot of the development of players in terms of mental, physical parts of our game had to be done at national team. That's where you got the sort of technical, tactical knowledge placed on us in the physical demands, because it was always seen at obviously international level, the physical demands are higher than at club level in England at the time, in the UK at the time. So everything was, you could be at camps for 2 weeks and you're doing double days, double sessions, and you're doing all these things to try and lift those standards and develop us quicker, I guess, so that we could compete on those levels. Whereas now, I guess the onus has shifted again to clubs, because that's where players are spending the bulk of their time, their full time. We were club players training with our team twice a week. Then 2 weeks down the road, you're playing Germany in a European Championship. Like, it's just a completely different time in the game now, where players are coming in young, a part of RTCs and academies, where also the demands rise with that as the structure and the support and the resources have increased. So that's the major difference for me in terms of where the national team has shifted, because it's become a more professionalized environment all round that really allows, I guess, the time for those players to go to national team and just focus on national team and playing football, hopefully, and not just all the other elements you got to squeeze in.
That's a lot of elements to squeeze in. What makes you most proud about your England career?
Ooh, what makes me most proud? I just think for me, even being selected for England, like that
Mhm.
first call up is 100% the proudest moment, because, you know, I didn't, I never, it wasn't an expectation. It wasn't like I knew I was going to play for England. I just always tried to perform at my best for my club, and be seen. But then to get that acknowledgement, or, you know, be seen from a national team perspective as a player that they want to represent the country, I think is a great honor. And, you know, equal to that, I would say, obviously, the 2012 Olympics, you know, kicking off the Olympics with Kelly Smith, and knowing that the whole nation was going to be behind us, of our family, our friends, in a sort of pinnacle moment for ourselves, but also the game as a whole, having never had a football team in the competition, was like a hugely monumental moment and a proud moment, for myself, especially because of my dual heritage. You know, all my family, you know, my Ghanaian grandparents, they were just as proud to see, you know, their granddaughter do it on that stage, representing the nation, you know, that she was born in. So yeah, that's for me is
Final two questions then. Biggest challenge in football?
biggest challenge in football.
Mm.
Pre-season.
I like that answer.
Pre-season. Oh, pre-season. I think it's the biggest challenge in football. It's, you know, it's probably, when I say the hardest you work, I don't mean that you don't work hard throughout the season, but it's the hardest in, you know, a very short succession of time compared to a season, that you really are just beating up your body. To some degree, you're beating up your body so that it can adapt and adjust to the conditions you will face, when you have to not just run, jump, hop, you know, be in contact, but you have to do all of that, plus kick a ball, plus make good decisions, plus when you slightly get more tired, you know, keep doing the things with quality. So honestly, I always say, I think pre-season and I've had a few different types of pre-season too. So, oh yeah, and to motivate yourself to just keep going, and even when it's hard, and you know, you got to do that extra, that sprint, or, you know, that run, to keep motivating yourself to just do it and do it again, time and time again. It is hard mentally. I don't think people understand always how mentally challenging it is to go for that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and depending on if you have games as well, like friendly games to break up that period, then it can be a slog, I'm not going to lie. And when I was in Sweden, pre-season was like 3 months long, so in the winter. So it's also the conditions, you know. I was like, it's freezing cold, it's minus 14, you're outside, it's getting dark at 4 or 5, you know, that's hard, like mentally and physically. So yeah, that's my answer. I'm not changing.
To be honest, pre-season in minus 14 conditions does not sound appealing to anyone. And I suppose that amplifies the point when, with the Premier League coming back this week, for example, and all the managers are saying they've had, 2-3 weeks turnaround since the season ended.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably maybe a sense that again goes under the radar about how tough pre-season actually is. For the one that's just happened leading up to this season, was it tougher considering there was that massive break with, I suppose, non-activity in terms of
Yeah, no, yeah, I think it definitely was, because number one, there was this sort of limbo position everyone was in for a few weeks. So you weren't really knowing what was happening this week, next week. Is the season going to commence? Is it not? Do I continue training? Do I stop? Do I, you know, you're trying to find the right balance of not doing too much or doing too little, which is much harder when you're not in this environment that is designed for you, specifically designed for the team to be in the right place, in the right shape at the right time, progressively. And then that disconnect, you're not connected to your teammates because we're all apart in different parts of the country, you know, in our own home countries. It was a challenge. the lack of access to facilities or resources made it also challenging, because then, some people might have a treadmill, some might not, or a watt bike, some might not. So you're also having to adjust the way you train. And that for me at times is really hard, because, I like football because it's a team sport, not because I have to do a big chunk of training by myself in isolation. And part of the joys of being in a football team or football environment is that we all know that there's certain parts of it that aren't always easy or fun or nice, but you just got to do. And sometimes, like me, I'd rather have a teammate or a couple of teammates or the team in general where we can like support each other, push each other, help each other get through those more mentally challenging barriers in the game, when the physical demands are really hard. So I think the lockdown was sort of an experience that most of us will never forget, and hopefully would have added something else to our toolbox, if you like, in how to be adaptable and how to adjust and kick on. But I think it was nothing that anyone could have prepared for really. You're not on a ball in the same way for 2 or 3 months. Most of the girls and the guys are not used to that. I think they're used to, playing a whole season, maybe getting 2 or 3 weeks off and then going back into a pre-season and then playing. So you never really lose that momentum or that feeling in your body.
Yeah, and like I say, that detachment, I suppose, from your team. Another string to your bow, as you say.
Yeah, definitely.
Last one to finish on a high and highlight.
Oh, wow.
If you can pick one.
Okay, I'll try and pick
one.
one.
There's been a few.
I'll try and pick one, but I think obviously when I won with my team the quadruple with Arsenal and we went unbeaten the whole season, has to be up there as one of the highlights, because I don't think anyone can really understand what you have to do to be able to do that consistently, and do it at a time in the game as well where you didn't have the kind of all the resources that we have today, all the support mechanisms that allow us to sort of get in the best shape of our lives, or get the best technical advice or whatever it is, tactical advice. We literally were a 2 times a week type of team, but somehow there was a shared mentality that put us in a position to win, and I think, and maybe I'm being biased, but I think if you spoke to people that were really tuned into the women's game as well at that time and they watched our team, I would like to think they would say that we also played a good brand of football with the players we had. So I think to do what we did the way we wanted to do it, because I think we all really enjoyed playing on that team, we enjoyed the football we played as consistently as we did it, definitely is one of the highlights of my career.
I think that's fair enough to pick that as a highlight, and like you say, that team still gets talked about for what it did. So I think it's very apt that we end on that one. With that then, ultimately I'm left to say thank you again for coming on to the show and taking the time out to chat with us. I know we talked a lot about some very broad subjects, but I think some very important subjects that, like you say, need to get pointed out, picked up on, debated even further down the line. And also, like you said, it's not a campaign that goes on for 2-3 weeks. It's the future, ultimately. So a lot of important messages there, I think. So thank you so much, Anita. We look forward to seeing what the season holds for you two on the football pitch. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
The Women's Football Diary is brought to you by Sportspiel. You can join the conversation and spread the word using #Women's Football Diary now on social media. You can follow Sportspiel on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram using the handle @SportspielPod, and visit our website, which is sportspielonline.com. The Women's Football Diary will return next Friday with a brand new episode featuring Leicester City midfielder Remy Allen.